Hello, and welcome to Gemini's Twitter Space. I'm your host, Brittany Elise, a senior associate on Gemini's strategy and ventures team, where we manage Gemini Frontier Fund, our early stage corporate venture capital arm. Today, I'll be chatting with Jose Fabrega, the head of marketing at Metis. Hey, Jose.
Hey Brittany, how's it going? Thanks for having
Good.
us
How are
here.
you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Ready for
Love your
this?
crypto punk.
I appreciate it. It's actually a Metis spawn, but you gotta love it. I'm repping
Love
over
it.
here.
Metis is a layer 2 Ethereum rollup platform with the goal of improving scalability and lowering fees. Metis uses multiple sequencers that pool transactions back to the Ethereum mainnet. These sequencers are called decentralized autonomous companies, known as DACs. DACs confirm transactions by operating nodes and staking Metis token directly from using a form of proof of stake consensus mechanism. Gemini recently listed the Metis token, so we're super excited to chat with them today, and we're going to dig into all of the details throughout this space. But first, Jose, talk to me. How did you fall down the rabbit hole and get into crypto?
Okay, so I'm from Latin America. I'm from Panama specifically. And if there's anyone in the audience from any Latin American country, like you might have experienced the level of non transparency, to call it like that, on different countries, different nations of Latin America. So I always dreamed pretty much with a way or the day in which we could see all of these state funds being managed in a transparent way. Because at the end of the day, these are all taxes paid by citizens of these countries, and in most of these cases, we end up seeing these state funds used for non-elected purposes, to go like that. It's pretty much like corruption in shorter words. So I dreamed about the day in which we could kind of like use a technology, transparent technology, and hey, I found out about crypto, Bitcoin, kind of like blockchain technology overall. So I ended up kind of like reading about it, and I used to work at investment banking like before. And the more I read about Bitcoin, about blockchain technology, I went down like further and further down the rabbit hole until I ran into Metis. And I mean, one thing led to another, and here I am today.
That's
So,
amazing. I love to hear that you coming from Latin America and you see the benefits that crypto could provide. And, speaking to that, do you think that it's changed your livelihood at all? And if so, in what ways?
it could change our livelihoods like in a whole different ways. As of right now, it hasn't at all. We haven't seen that level of adoption, which kind of like it's actually involved in the day-to-day activities or habits of different people, like including myself. It's not a necessity, or it's not something that it's kind of like that. That's something that someone uses on their day-to-day basis, or kind of like a neededly, if that makes sense. Kind of like once I do think we have the potential to become key for kind of like the day-to-day basis or the day-to-day routine of everyone else. I think that crypto is really gonna get to that adoption point once people get to use crypto and don't even realize that they're using crypto or blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we hear all the time about extracting away the Web3 from Web3 so people don't realize that they're using it. And when we think about Metis, how has this benefited people or developers in Latin America?
One of the biggest ways that comes to mind is one of the reasons why I was so kind of like a impressed with Metis, and one of the things that drove me into Metis was their decentralized autonomous companies vision. So, like, if like people here are familiar with DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, you can have an idea of what I'm referring to when I talk about decentralized autonomous companies. Metis, I'm gonna go, or I don't want to kind of like spill the beans like too early into the chat, but these just kind of like we look at it as the evolution of DAOs, and it's a way of onboarding traditional businesses into Web3. Pretty much a DAO, but with a way more usable structure or way more efficient structure that allows for these Web2 corporations or enterprises to manage their day-to-day businesses through these kind of like DAOs or DAX, and specifically in Latin America and for people building, like if you're a dev, if you're kind of like an entrepreneur or whatnot. This is very useful because and I say kind of like first experience in these countries, there's a lot of obstacles, kind of like hurdles that one gotta jump to be able to open a business. In some cases, you're even gonna run into the classic kind of like a like state figure asking, hey yo, like what do I get, what do I get in return, you know? So it's not really a viable way per se for everyone. There's a lot of people that might have a great idea, might have just enough money to play that idea out, but you know what, they might not have enough to that kind of like push or to go through that government, like through that initial hurdle. So I think that giving them the alternative, or not the alternative, the possibility to create these decentralized autonomous companies and be able to kind of like put their ideas in play, like wherever they are in the world, it's fascinating. Like, is it a kind of like finalized version? Is everything figured out as of right now? Absolutely not. There's still a lot of things to kind of like improve, a lot of things to kind of like figure out as well. But I think it's something that could and that can kind of like will actually benefit a lot of builders, entrepreneurs, and whatever you want. Literally, like throughout all, not only Latin America, but a lot of countries that might have these same type of difficulties around the world.
That's so interesting. It's actually the first time I'm hearing this phrase decentralized autonomous companies. I've obviously heard of decentralized autonomous organizations. So I'm just curious, what is the difference between a DAO and a DAC?
To be honest, like on the MVP phase, at least kind of like the minimum viable product phase, the main difference is going to be the structural part. Kind of like these DACs are going to be pretty much kind of like a framework built with smart contract templates, allowing these Web2 corporations or organizations or like any type of organization, corporation, like little business, whatever you want, kind of like perform their day-to-day operations into in Web3. So this way, they're actually taking advantage of the decentralization of the network, the immutability of the network. Like there's no discrepancies, which is kind of like something that a lot of businesses have to be very careful, like every single day. To be honest, because it's all based on trust. In here, kind of like in blockchain, is trustless. So it allows people to actually or to like it facilitates people the way in which they can do businesses. So like by bringing all these enterprises over here and facilitating the way in which they can make businesses, like I think it's a great step kind of like a forward from the DAOs, because DAOs are a phenomenal idea, like as they are, but they are, as we were saying before, not in their complete version per se, because they lack a lot of kind of like an organization or structure, however you want to call it, and also they have some governance issues that I don't know if you'd want me to go in as of right now or later on in the spaces. You tell
Yeah,
me,
we're
Rainy.
going to dig into all of it throughout this space. And let's turn our attention to Metis. Can you give us the Eli 5 or the Explain Like I'm 5 explanation of what Metis is offering in 2 sentences or less?
I mean, in Eli 5 and 2 sentences or less are completely different things, in my opinion. I can try one and then another one. I can do in 2 sentences or less, which will be Metis is building a blockchain or a network for open collaborations across the globe. And for Metis or an L2 explained Eli 5, I would say imagine Ethereum. Like this is the example that I always use. Like, and I mean, I successfully explained what was Metis to not only my mom but my grandmother as well. So I'm very confident in that this is kind of like a very easy, like kind of like a metaphor for people to catch like what's an L2. Think of an L2 or think of Ethereum as a highway. Think of Ethereum as the safest highway in the world, actually. This is the most decentralized and secure highway in the whole world, right? But there's a problem. Every time you go in that highway, let's say you're going to work or you're going back home, there's a lot of congestion. There's kind of like a lot of cars, traffic, and you cannot get places efficiently. So you are facing kind of like a delay, kind of like a long like long time to get to your destination, and you're also paying for high, how do you call it, like pay toll fees, right? So layer twos would be as if you could add or adding a new lane, kind of like habilitating a new lane in this highway. So this new lane is just as secure, just as decentralized as the whole, like as the rest of the highway, but this lane is always empty. This lane is always empty and there's no congestion. Why? Because this lane only works with collective transportation. So instead of everyone going in their individual vehicle and kind of like waiting in the line and paying for their pay toll and whatnot, you actually ride this collective transport, which would be the layer two or roll up, as you want to call it, rolling up the transactions. And everyone in the collective transport, instead of paying individually for the pay toll, they divide the fee among everyone that is riding this transport. So this fee that is usually paid in Ethereum is divided among all the transactions that are being rolled up. So once they get to their destination way faster than if they were in Ethereum, they just they get there kind of like with the same security, decentralization, shorter time, and lower cost. So it's really kind of like a new lane that makes you or allows you to get way faster, cheaper, and with the same safety to anywhere you're going.
It's a great explanation, and I love that you're teaching your grandma about crypto. It's definitely encouraging that if your grandma can understand it, I can, and all the listeners on here can understand what you guys are building at Metis as well. And how did the founders come up with the idea?
Oh, okay. So the founders, like, there are three co-founders: Elena Sinelnikova, Kevin Liu, and Yuan Su. Elena was like she is actually the founder of Crypto Chicks. Crypto Chicks is kind of like an incubator accelerator for projects and empowering women in Web3, and they are present in over 50 countries as of right now. They're one of the longest, kind of like the longest standing incubators and accelerators in the space. And she actually started having kind of like these meetings with a bunch of kind of like friends of hers, and that led to kind of like talking about crypto in Toronto, and that led to her meeting with the other two co-founders, Kevin Liu and Yuan Su. Yuan was one of the lead devs at IBM's Hyperledger, so you can imagine kind of like why he's so focused on decentralized autonomous companies per se, or the enterprise part, since Hyperledger was pretty much focused or a enterprise blockchain, you know. So it's he really has a vision of Metis working kind of like the L2 just means kind of like the means to an end, in the sense that this is going to be the base layer that will allow kind of like enterprises and organizations or anything to collaborate openly and trustlessly in Web3. And Kevin, who is also kind of like he's pretty much the strategic mastermind. Also, he's the like super active co-founder, and he's also very well known in the space. So them three put together this idea, aiming to create a blockchain or a framework for open collaboration among all businesses, organizations, or whatnot, in which they can collaborate just as easy or easier as they do nowadays, but without having to trust third parties with their information, without having to trust anyone at all, actually, just doing it trustlessly and in an efficient fashion.
God, and I love to hear that you guys have a female founder. Was she the inspiration behind your logo?
Actually, the inspiration behind the logo is not her necessarily, but just the idea of the woman, kind of like the female empowerment in Web3. Because Web3 being a space which was so kind of like predominantly kind of like outside by men, and it's very exciting to see like not only women like entering the space, but founding projects in the space, you know. And recently, when Metis went to Latin America, to Argentina, we also saw so many women founders and just women in their different events, like being part of Web3 organizations, Web3 companies, like all sorts of things, and really just gives you an idea of how big will be the role of women, like just kind of like it will be just as big as kind of like the role of men in the space. And I so we're just kind of like at the beginning of that. We're gonna see a lot of more participation, kind of like we're gonna see a progressively like a progressive increase in women participation in Web3. And Metis is really kind of like trying to not only Metis but like crypto chicks as well, like trying to empower this as one of the key missions and visions, kind of like women like being empowered in Web3.
So happy to hear that. It's incredible that you guys are focused on female empowerment, especially in the Web3 space, which is often pretty crowded by men. So if you're a lady in the audience, go ahead and throw up an emoji. Let's give our support for Metis. And I want to dig into rollups. How do they keep transaction speed high and gas fees low?
Ah, awesome. Okay, so in this one specifically, I will do first kind of like the Eli 5, kind of like repeat the Eli 5 explanation, then I'll go kind of like a little bit on the tech side. These literally, like, you can think of it as the fees, or kind of like these vehicles, since instead of going in individual vehicles, we're going in the collective one. Like, we're not making a line of vehicles per se, so we're not making kind of like we're riding in the traffic, and the fee is kind of like being divided among all of these passengers from the collective vehicle. So in the blockchain, rollups are able to reduce fees by creating a batch of transactions and sending that batch of transactions as if it was one, like as one block, into the Ethereum mainnet. In this way, they can do what we are just explaining through a vehicle or the highway analogy, which is dividing the transaction fee from mainnet among all the transactions being rolled up into that single batch and being processed and sent through to Ethereum mainnet.
Got it. I love that explanation. You have a really great way of just breaking it down in simple to understand terms. And there's different types of rollups, right? There's the optimistic and there's the ZK or zero knowledge rollups. Can you explain to us what the difference is between the two of these?
Yeah, absolutely. So optimistic rollups are pretty much optimistic because they're optimistic in the sense that there's data availability, and that there's gonna be kind of like the data needed for the transaction to be executed. They're optimistic about the kind of like the rollup per se, the result. So they always leave a 7 day window after these transactions take place in order for for any type of challenges called fraud proofs to be executed. And in this sense, the user kind of like, since the system is being optimistic, it leaves kind of like this 7 day window for any type of margin of error per se, in which validators can catch any malicious activity or any malicious kind of like a behavior that took place, any transaction that might have had any type of exploit or whatnot, and be able to revert it inside this 7 day window. So they are very efficient. They are kind of like they are able to reduce fees a lot in comparison to the mainnet, but they also have these uh, little kind of like a, not an issue is that however you want to look at it, it can also be an advantage because it's, since it always allows this 7 day kind of like window for transactions to be like a, for challenge or whatnot, the withdrawals from the roll up to mainnet also take 7 days. So this is kind of like this, of course, through the official bridges from any optimistic roll up. And this is the case for, yeah, for every optimistic roll up, and it's always in like 7 days. But that's also a reason why there's third party bridges and whatnot. I'm not really gonna get like too much into detail, but CK rollups are pretty much a, it's a lot of people think of it as kind of like the the evolution pretty much, or the newest and most efficient tech, because it's a way of proving kind of like some type of data, or proving that that some data is there, is available, and the transaction is kind of like correct without having to access that data. And that way they're able to save also a lot of cost by being able to prove it without necessarily attaching all this stuff kind of like to the blockchain per se as the optimistic rollups. So they also work with validity proofs, which is way kind of like in the withdrawal sense or verification sense, it's way better. I like in my personal opinion, of course, than optimistic rollups in the sense that if there's a validity proof sent out or produced, it's because the transaction is already approved and it's all good. And after this, there's no need for kind of like 7 day for window or whatnot, because if the proof was produced, then the information is there and it's available. So it's kind of like a just a secure, more efficient version of rollups per se, but it's also still in a very experimental phase, and it has a little bit of issues in the way of kind of like being incorporated to current EVM models or Ethereum as a whole, as it is known today. So optimistic rollups are very much more kind of like incorporable, if that makes sense. Kind of like they're easier to incorporate and they're more kind of like a user friendly for Ethereum devs and EVM models. And CK, it's not really a match for EVM, so that's why it's been kind of like such a hassle to launch it for way like a lot of different platforms that are working into it. So it's still, like I said, an experimental thing. And once they manage to kind of like create that match between ZK and EVM, it's going to be pretty good. But that's one of the low sides from it. Like both of them have good side, kind of like good things, and relatively bad things. So that's kind of like the little overview from both of them.
Super helpful overview, Jose. And just to clarify for the audience, which one does Metis use?
Metis is currently using an optimistic role model.
Got it. And if anyone in the audience has a question for Jose, go ahead and post it in the chat below, and I'll be reading those off at the end for him. Okay, so let's switch gears, Jose. When we're thinking about competitive advantage, how is Metis different from other layer 2 Ethereum scaling solutions like Polygon or Arbitrum, for example?
Okay, so this is interesting because I didn't want to go super kind of like tech, kind of like into deep into a tech, but like you're kind of like making me. So I will kind of like, and don't get me wrong, I love it though. So we are different than other optimistic rollups also because we recently incorporated kind of like a smart L2 architecture. Optimistic rollups or any type of rollups, since like they whenever they are processing kind of like a batch of transactions or whatnot, they submit to the mainnet the Merkle tree root and the state root. You can think of them as if they were identifier tags. They submit this to the main chain, and then they have to submit all the transaction data from the roll, kind of like from the transactions executed from the transaction batch, right? And rollups are very data hungry, so this is a lot of data. And submitting all of this data to the L1, it's actually very costly. And this is kind of like why whenever there's a lot of activity or a lot of high usage in Ethereum, you can also kind of like not control L2 fees going up, because fees in L2 are a product of the amount of kind of like demand for block space in L1. If there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of people trying to submit or put transactions into the blocks that are taking place or being put out in that second, right? So there's a lot of demand for putting those transactions into the block. So what these miners do or what the networks does, it starts pretty much kind of like charging higher fees, right? So there's more demand for block space, so there's higher bids. So these L2s also have to start bidding higher to put their blocks into Ethereum. And the more usage there's in Ethereum, the higher these fees are going to go. So in the case of of optimism or arbitrum per se, which would be the most similar ones to Metis, like at least way more similar than me like to Metis than Polygon per se, they wouldn't be able to control or maintain kind of like a stable rate of fees, because they depend on submitting all this data to the L1, and the more expensive the kind of like the block space gets, the more expensive these fees on L2s are going to get. Metis, on the other hand, manages to just submit these identifier tags that we like the Merkle tree root and state root, and the rest of the data it's submitted in a distributed storage. So they Metis have several kind of like it has a new also mechanism incorporated that allows the validator from L1 to pull to always pull this data from L2. And there's also kind of like a game theory incorporation as well, in which the sequencer has to pretty much stake the same amount of money that he's gonna process in the transaction. So there's never gonna be an incentive, kind of like to act in a malicious way. So by achieving the same security than other rollups, and being able to just kind of like submit a little piece of the data that has to go into a mainnet, they manage to drastically reduce these transaction fees, and pay pretty much kind of like a fixed rate by utilizing this distributed storage. And later on, Metis will be able to switch from this from storing or submitting data to this distributed storage to the L1 per se, depending on if it's more costly, kind of like if it's high usage or low usage environment for the L1. If it's, let's say that it's more costly to use the distributed storage than to actually submit the transaction that's in the L1 because there's too low of a usage, which has happened, then it would switch back to store all the like or submit all the data on chain. And this is a really key feature for any type of businesses, because if you have a business, like, you are very concerned of margins, profit margins. And if there's variable cost of executing these transactions, and you want to go kind of like you want to be adopted, you want to go mainstream, you got to be able to offer customers a fixed price. And if you are not able to offer customers a fixed price, or you try but you have fees that are fluctuating, then either you won't offer a fixed price, or you will have to absorb these fluctuations of transaction fees. In Metis, businesses can count of that stability, and they can offer a product for a fixed price, and they can count on having those margins. So Metis is really kind of like focusing on their vision, which is in among one of their key focuses, bringing corporations or organizations kind of like Web 2, like enterprises, to Web 3. And they are focusing on it, facilitating and creating an environment which allows them to do so and perform their day-to-day businesses and offer their products with confidence, just as in Web 2. I'm sorry if I talked like way too much in this last statement. Let me know if there's any questions or if I left anything out.
No, no need to apologize at all, Jose. We love listening to you explain the differences here. And it's interesting, you said that there's no incentive to act maliciously. Can we double click on this a bit?
Absolutely. So these DACs that we were talking about, they are gonna be, they are gonna have the chance to. So one of the topics that we haven't covered in Metis is reputation power. Matrix reputation power. This is gonna be one of the product rollouts that we're gonna have in the second half of the year. So pretty soon. And I mean, it's still kind of like an MVP, minimum viable product, but still like out there. And this reputation power is going to consist on-chain reputation based on soulbound tokens. So this reputation is going to consist on achievements, milestones, whatnot, and a lot of course, like more complex uh, code that is going to allow to create pretty much like not a repository, but kind of like a you can almost think of it as an on-chain CV of kind of like what have you done, where have you contributed, where have you been, kind of like how active you are in different governance protocols, like if you have acted maliciously or whatnot, also kind of like all these type of stuff. I mean, the malicious part is still gotta be, of course, like worked a lot more, because it's mostly to be able to prove what you have contributed to the ecosystem. That's what we're aiming for. So if someone acts maliciously in a like while having a really built up CV, you can you can forget about all the benefits that you would be attaining from this type of CV. So the thing is to not kind of like get lost. These soulbound tokens are gonna allow pretty much kind of like to prove provenance of assets. For example, as of right now, like we only know that an NFT is original per se because we see the blue check mark in OpenSea, and this is actually going to allow and OpenSea being kind of like a centralized institution. We're not really kind of like playing by the ethos of Web3. These soulbound tokens would actually allow an artist to, let's say, send a collection of NFTs and have a soulbound token attached to each of these NFTs, proving the provenance of these NFTs, kind of like proving that they're original. Or we can also apply it for GameFi. Like we've seen in Web2, gamers like Ninja, for example, in Fortnite, making a lot of money. Why? Like because they're able to monetize their reputation and their skills. In Web3, users aren't really able to do this, and one of the reasons is because there's no reputation whatsoever. So by allowing them to create this reputation, allowing them to create this kind of like a, you can call it what, like GameFi CV, or just kind of like prove their abilities, like they can actually monetize this reputation, these skills, like via, you can, I mean, there's several ways: promos, streaming, like you name it, like signings, like literally like a lot of ways. And the way Metis is gonna apply it, it's governance, kind of like the soulbound tokens. It's going to apply it in a governance way, because one of the things at the beginning of these Twitter Spaces that we said is that, remember that I told you, well, DAOs have a lot of little kind of like inconveniences that I want to elaborate later on in the space. It was this that I'm talking about right now. Most DAOs are managed through coin voting. Everyone that needs, or whoever wants to vote, needs to hold a coin. So the votes, or the deciding what's going to happen with the future of the DAO, doesn't go to the people that contribute the most, but instead to the highest bidders. And who are the highest bidders? The people with the deepest pockets. And we're usually talking about whales. So we go again to centralization, which defeats the purpose of Web3 or a DAO whatsoever. So by incorporating these soulbound tokens, we're able to migrate away from this coin voting system and make sure that whoever is voting will be actually looking, or looking out for the long-term health and sustainability of the ecosystem, and not necessarily the long-term benefit, or short-term benefit of a participant only. So these soul-bound tokens, this method of reputation, is going to be combined with the DAX. The DAX are gonna be that, you can think of them as dApps or different businesses that are gonna be part of the Metis ecosystem, and they will have the chance to become part of the sequencer. But you can think of the sequencer as the L2 validators, so they can become part of this peer network, which is what we call it. And by becoming part of the peer network, they will be one of these sequencers that we are saying that won't have any incentive, right? So not only they will be processing the transaction in a network in which they will have a lot of benefits, and they will have even a revenue stream by being a validator and by having their dApp in the network, but they will also have to stake. Let's say if the transaction is worth $50,000, I'm processing a $50,000 transaction, like my DAC is doing it, then I have to stake for that block like $50,000 at least until the block is finalized. That way, I will never try to exploit the network, or the block per se. Try to kind of like take advantage or exploit that type of money, because I have the same amount of money attached to this process. So it's not only that I would lose my reputation that I've created through so much work and contributions to the ecosystem, but I would also lose the same amount of money that I'm looking to get or to earn. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, soulbound tokens have been one of the hottest topics this year. I feel like I'm reading and hearing about it everywhere, and it's so fascinating to hear about how you guys are planning to integrate and even monetize them. Now, I have to ask, Ethereum went through a recent upgrade from proof of work to proof of stake. Has this affected your business at all?
Nah, not really. Not really. It was kind of like there was a lot of talk like before the marriage about, oh, like what are projects gonna do, what are like everyone's gonna do, are they gonna support proof of work Ethereum or whatnot. Like no, like of course everyone's supporting like proof of stake. Business is business as usual, you know. So there's not really any big difference brought up through this change or through this migration from proof of work to proof of stake.
That's great to hear, and I'm sure that that gave your team and devs a lot of comfort. And on your website, it states that Metis equals Ethereum times S to the power of 6. Can you explain what this means?
Yeah, I actually, I'm actually trying to remember what, like, I know it's scale, like, and I should know this, you know, like it's scalability, simplicity, speed, storage, security, and savings. Yeah, those are the 6S. This is what they mean by kind of like S by 6, kind of like having Ethereum with the simplicity, speed, scalability, security that you want, and offering a distributed storage and helping you pretty much foster like your savings, kind of like help you save, you know, through the economic perspective.
Yeah, I love that. It's a super easy way to like fully understand what you guys are offering. And I also read that there'll soon be the ability for smart contracts to write themselves from a library of templates for common use cases. Where are you guys at with the launch of this feature?
As of right now, we're approaching the initial launch. We usually, like most of our launches, go in a MVP, then beta launch, then kind of like a further launch, and then like it's a process until we launch a finalized version of each product. This product that we're talking about right now, which would be the DAX, kind of like the DAC infrastructure that we were just talking about, like a little earlier. These kind of like smart contract templates that will help kind of like all types of organizations, corporations, whatnot to be onboarded. The MVP of this product will likely be released late Q4, late Q4, and so I mean that would be the very kind of like initial launch, the minimum viable product. But I think we're possibly going to see that launch happening this year, kind of like late Q4. That's being a little optimistic, but I'm actually like, I think this is something that we will see. And then beginning or early next year is that we'll see the more functionals or complete parts of the product.
Great. We'll have to keep our eyes open for that. And what kind of smart contract use cases are most commonly used?
Oh, well, in the Metis ecosystem, as of right now, I would say DeFi. Why? Because I'm not sure. Kind of like, well, actually, you whenever you ask me, kind of like, what would be the two lines, kind of like, or one liner for Metis, and I told you that kind of like a blockchain or a framework for open collaboration. If we're actually like, if we had to rephrase that framework for open collaboration, I would also say or call it Web3 economy hub. This Web3 economy hub, to become a reality, need a solid financial foundation. Just like any type of society, they need a solid financial foundation to be able to kind of like thrive. So if we want to create this Web3 economy hub, we need to have a solid DeFi foundation for it to thrive, and that's what we have been focusing on for a long part of the life of Metis in creating this foundation and this base to be able to thrive once everything is kind of like complete, when all the pieces are put together, you know.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I'm just wondering, what if a non-coder deploys a smart contract using one of the templates and then later realizes that there's a bug in the contract? Will Metis help spot and fix these potential bugs or exploits for the non-coders?
Oh, of course, Metis would like definitely like collaborate and definitely like show its appreciation through some type of bounty or whatnot to these coders. I mean, the I cannot like promise like any numbers or whatnot. Like you should take my word on this because like it hasn't been we haven't released or I haven't even seen like specific numbers of what type of like bounties we would see or whatnot. But I definitely know that Metis like values security a lot, so if this was the case, they would definitely collaborate and think in a very kind of like a attractive way. These kind of like these bounty hunters, if you want to call them like that. And in the case of someone kind of like finding a bug or whatnot, and how would Metis do it if it's not necessarily kind of like fixing a bug, but instead just finding a bug? Like they would definitely work with these people and fix it. As I said, Metis, one of the two things or that Metis values the most is education and security, because Web3, it's a place that for beginners it can be a really dark place at the beginning. They are pretty much lost, no compass, no nothing, because it's so new that a lot of the education might not even be correct at all, and if it's correct, sometimes it's not complete. So it's we definitely can like pride ourselves of helping users understand the ecosystem better, and we work tirelessly in kind of like progressively make Metis and Web3 a safer space as well. So yeah, we definitely, as I said, like there will definitely be some type of kind of like a bounty or whatnot.
That's great to hear that you guys are going to have a bounty program. And I know it's something that's very prevalent in a lot of different ecosystems. And so, okay, when on the site it states that Metis is fully EVM or Ethereum Virtual Machine compatible. For those who are new to crypto, can you explain what this means?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of blockchains, for example, let's say Phantom, Avalanche, whatnot, they're EVM compatible blockchains. So no, they're EVM blockchains. So they are EVM, meaning that they can interact, or they can exchange kind of like messages with Ethereum built or Ethereum Virtual Machine blockchains. So Metis and Layer 2 is kind of like being oh, and there's other blockchains as well that are EVM compatible. It pretty much means that it's way easier for developers to build on the network. They don't they, they barely have to change the code whatsoever to deploy in the network. Let's say if they have a project already in Ethereum, they shouldn't have to really kind of like stress when deploying on an EVM compatible blockchain. Metis is EVM equivalent, meaning that if EVM compatible, it's easy for developers. EVM equivalent, it's a walk on the park. Like developers can easily deploy their contracts in Metis if they're already in Ethereum in an afternoon. So like that's the feedback that we've gotten from a lot of developers that are building in the network, and we're this is another thing that we can like pride ourselves with, because we love to see and to get the feedback of developers telling us how easy and how developer friendly it is to build on the network.
That's amazing. It's got to be developer friendly. Otherwise, people aren't going to be coming over there to build. So great to hear that. And again, if anyone in the audience has a question for Jose, go ahead and pop those into the chat below, and we'll be reading those off shortly. All right, Jose. So one of the benefits listed for Metis is that it's an easy DAO quick starter. Let's dig into this a bit. How does Metis help kickstart DAOs?
I think it's more of a DAC Kickstarter, and it will be a DAC Kickstarter. As of right now, it's more of a Web3 kind of like project Kickstarter, in the sense that Metis has had or has sponsored a lot of hackathons up to now, and it's actually going to have its own hackathon in Bogota, because I mean, I told you that we're very kind of like we're focused on empowering female kind of like participants in Web3, but we also think of the Web3 as something that needs to be global, something that shouldn't be just kind of like isolated to a specific group or whatnot. So we are also trying to introduce these kind of like technology, these events, to Latin America as well. We're going to be attending DEF CON, and right before DEF CON, we're going to be having our BOGO Hacks hackathon. So Metis is very kind of like active in the educational side of Web3, as I told you. So we're like not only with like I think, yeah, yeah, this is gonna be the first hackathon that we have this year, like of our own, after sponsoring a bunch, and we're actually very excited. We also have some Latin American teams that are gonna be participating, and there's even this is going to be the second hackathon that we participate in Latin America. First, fully kind of like bios. So yeah, we're very excited. We participate a lot or kickstart a lot of projects per se that want to participate in the space. Later in the future, we're going to be a DAC Kickstarter, and yeah, I hope that responds the question.
Super exciting to hear that you guys are going to be at DevCon down in Bogota. It's probably pretty easy for your team to get over there. Will you have a booth there, or how can people find you?
Oh yeah, we'll have a booth there. We'll have a Metis Fest after the hackathon. There's gonna be a lot of action. We even kind of like we're doing a little tour, like a full tour, kind of like in Central America because we're going to DevCon. Then there's this Medellin in a kind of like a smaller, kind of like a part of smaller city of Colombia. We're also going there, kind of like of course, kind of like a smaller part of the team. And then since I'm based in Panama, I'm gonna come back home, and some of my colleagues are gonna come with me, and we're gonna go to Ethereum Panama. So it's a full tour, but we are very interested in expanding Web3 towards Latin America. So I mean, it's fully worth it. We're very excited about the upcoming weeks, and I mean, like I'm very positive that we're gonna see like very and kind of like exciting results from the hackathon and the conference at all, like whatsoever.
Absolutely. Conference season is always exciting, especially when you get to go to another country. All right, let's dig into the Metis token. How does this play a role in the platform? Is it a governance token or a utility token, or is it a little bit of both?
Oof, that's a great question. So, Metis, as of right now, like there's no native staking in Metis. So a lot of people wonder, just like, hey, yo, so like, what do I do with this token? Metis, like besides being kind of like the gas fee token to transact in the network, Metis is gonna be an essential part of governance. We were talking about how we want to empower contributors in the network in the ecosystem. So this kind of like by holding Metis, you're also kind of like or by holding like this reputation power that we were talking about, users or DAX are going to be able to become validators. Kind of like we're going to like end up amplifying the peer network at all. So we said kind of like decentralizing the sequencer of the layer two. You can think of it as just decentralizing the layer two, right? So by these DAX staking the reputation power, they're going to be able to earn a lot of VE metis, which will be kind of like the pretty much you can think of it as almost as if it was a governance score, which will be super useful. But for these DAX to actually be able to transact in the network or validate these transactions or whatnot, they're gonna have to be holding metis tokens. So the network kind of like for the net for becoming a validator of this network and being kind of like contributing to the security of the ecosystem in which you intend to put your business or have your business and generate an extra revenue stream by validating the network. These are kind of like some of the incentives that pretty much all dapps or dax I mean dapps would have to become dax, and all the incentives that dax would have to become a validator, kind of like for utilizing this token. So for these validators, it's kind of like a or the Metis token use case as of right now. It's mostly focused on the validator side, and once the DAX that we're talking about are also launched, the what we're saying that is going to be most likely MVP late this year or the full product kind of like early next year. Then we're also going to see the DAX staking. So DAX are going to be able to stake their Metis tokens, or users are going to be able to stake them in the DAC for a fixed APY, kind of like literally like helping validate the network. So if these DACs need big amounts of Metis to process these transactions or whatnot, it's like users are also going to be able to stake the Metis in these DACs. Like similar to a delegating system, if you want to think like that, if you want to think of it like that. So yeah, I mean, these is going to be the use case. It relies mostly on the gas side and on the securing the network side and the extra revenue stream once the DAC framework is at least fully functional. Not necessarily fully ready, but fully functional.
That's great. I love to hear that there's so many different ways that you guys have thought about how to use a token on the platform. And what about this Metis Marathon? What is that all about?
You're shooting all kind of like amazing questions. I like a little like I have to thank you for these questions. Okay, actually, like the Metis Marathon, like I was hoping myself to touch on this topic later on in the spaces. Like I'm glad you brought it on. Metis Marathon, it's kind of like the builder incentive campaign that we are promoting in our ecosystem. You can think of it as a period of high kind of like a high incentivization of builders to deploy in the network and for users to utilize the network. Why? Because we're going to be combining different grants, kind of like grants, the investment funds, kind of like we have our Genesis DAC fund. It's kind of like a decentralized fund. We're going to think of it like that, which is it is a $100 million investment fund for the Metis ecosystem. So by combining the grants, the investment fund, and the reputation power, we're gonna create a campaign in which we're gonna be incentivizing projects to be used, incentivizing users to transact, kind of like utilize and participate in not only one project but a flywheel of projects that we're gonna have kind of like composable one with the other, like one with each other, and we are also gonna allow users to earn different type of reputation power. This reputation power, like to simplify the terminology or the idea of it, you can think of it as NFTs because in most cases these are NFT badges. So people, besides getting these high APYs, they're also going to be able to get these NFT badges from different projects, and we're going to have some other surprises that we're going to roll out soon. Kind of like once we get some announcements out about the Metis Marathon. There's going to be some a little bit more concrete documentation on what's the Metis Marathon pretty soon out. So yeah, I would just say keep an eye on the Metis kind of like communication channels like Telegram, Discord, Medium, and of course Twitter. If you're an Instagram user, you can definitely follow us on Instagram as well. We're always active on there too. Always active everywhere, to be honest.
That's fantastic. Big congrats on the $100 million ecosystem fund. That's massive. Are you able to share who contributed to this fund? Was it the community, VCs? Was it from the Metis Treasury or a combination of these?
It was mostly VCs. Like I cannot disclose any of the names, but it's a decentralized and like the same. We call it. It's called a DAC, and I mean it was formed as a DAC, but it's like as we said an MVP. It's not really a fully functional version of the DAC itself, but we call it the Genesis DAC because it's supposed to be the first decentralized fund in the Metis ecosystem. So you can think of it as a organization of a lot of different VCs that are willing to invest and kind of like optimistic on the future of Metis.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely encouraging to hear that. And how does a developer apply for a grant?
It's very easy to apply for a grant. You can actually go to our like to a Metis website and you go into ecosystem, you go grants, and the project is kind of like pretty straightforward. Once you apply, the process or kind of like the application will be reviewed for the business like by the business development team, like all chats. So you can trust like they have pretty good judgment. They're gonna like read and kind of like go over all these applications. They're gonna pick which are the ones that are kind of like that fulfill all the requirements or all the check boxes that we're looking for, and we're gonna meet with them. Once the business development team meets with these projects and kind of like get a kind of like get a grasp of what's the projects, what's the team looking, kind of like a how's the team, kind of like a what's their long term vision or whatnot. Like once they actually get a feel of the project, they can then proceed with if like taking the next step or not, which would be sending them then to our Genesis DAC manager, like the Genesis DAC fund manager, who is Natalia Melin, and then she would be the one that would determine pretty much kind of like okay, like I can send you to the Genesis DAC, I can maybe kind of like hook you up with a grant or whatnot. There's also direct applications kind of like for a grant, applying directly for a grant or applying directly for the Genesis DAC. But in any case, you're gonna end up kind of like running into Natalia, which is the manager, kind of like. So yeah, process is not hard at all. If you have a solid idea, solid project, you like you're kind of like optimist on the L2 ecosystem, we highly recommend you to just send a text, send a DM, reach out to us. Our team is very friendly, and our team is always looking out for amazing projects, like good projects, quality projects that are wanting to build on any layer 2. As we said, we're EVM equivalent, so it should be pretty easy.
That's fabulous. So glad to hear that you guys are super excited to support the next wave of builders in the space. And I'm going to switch gears on you now. First, anyone in the audience, if you have a question, go ahead and drop that in the chat below. I'm going to be reading those off in a few minutes. But Jose, I see that you guys have an indexing product called Metis Graph. How is this different from the graph?
I would actually have to get you in touch with our developer team. I know we have the graph in our ecosystem also, so kind of like we have the graph node in our ecosystem. So uh, as I said, I would have to get you in touch with our developer team because me, like myself, like I'm not too sure what exactly kind of like I think it's an upcoming product that we'll also have on our roadmap, but it could be wrong. I don't want to talk too much on it.
That's okay, no worries. And how about the Metis Bridge? What is this used for, and how can someone access it?
The Met is what?
The bridge?
Oh, okay. Our Metis bridge. Metis bridge is pretty much the official L2 bridge. This is the bridge that allows you to bridge funds from Ethereum to the L2. This bridge utilizes the same technology as Metis, kind of like L2, as the optimistic rollup technology, and that's why it's very efficient to transact or to move funds from Ethereum to a layer 2 because it's pretty much immediate. But then if you're withdrawing funds from an L2 to a back to mainnet, Ethereum mainnet itself, it might be kind of like way more delayed or take the 7 day window that we talked before, and it's not like it might, it will take 7 days. It needs the 7 day window to be able to have it open for any type of challenges or validations of the transactions. So how can you access it? Again, you go into metis.io, metis.io, and then you just go into Bridge. Once you go into Bridge, like it will take you to our main bridge, and you can also check out all the third party bridges that we have in our ecosystem. And by the way, we're gonna be having a revamp of our bridge UI pretty soon. So please, kind of like stay stay tuned because I think it's gonna be looking pretty nice. So yeah.
Got it. And if there's anybody on the line that's running a project, how could they integrate with Metis? What steps does a project need to take to successfully integrate?
You just do it. Metis is an open source blockchain, so developers don't need any type of permission from the Metis Foundation, from the Metis team, or whatnot to deploy on the network. If they need help deploying the network, they can always reach out to us, and we can try to guide them or help them in deployment. But what do they need to do, or who do they need to reach out, or whatever? Like nobody. It's a they're kind of like it's just their decision. Once they want to deploy, they can do it. That's the beauty of open source.
That's great. So glad to hear that there's no gatekeepers along the way. And what about the community? How do they play a role in Metis's platform?
Oh, I mean, the community is Metis pretty much. Kind of like we love our community. Like we said, kind of like we prioritize educating our community all like at all times, and we think that the community plays a huge role since they are kind of like we're building for them like as well. Metis is a vision, but Metis kind of like all of our users or community are part of that vision, and them already being kind of like part of this journey kind of like makes us not only value them a lot, but value all their feedback, all their commentaries, all their everything. Kind of like we look at the Metis community as if it was a family. So we think they're literally just as key as any other core member of the team when it's about the network and like the ecosystem, or just kind of like the projects in itself growing.
That's wonderful. And last question for me, Jose. Give us the alpha. Is there any sneak peeks or features that'll be coming out next?
There's definitely some interesting deployments coming out next. I don't want to spill the beans, but I would definitely suggest follow our social media channels because we're going to be sharing everything on there and there will be a lot of things to be shared. So don't miss out.
All right, we're going to flip over into some audience questions. What is Metis doing to position itself to be a standout project during the next bull market?
Phenomenal question. I like it. I think it starts or it's pretty much linked towards what we previously said. We are building a layer two that is focused on open collaboration. So we're having kind of like Ethereum's, or like we envision to have Ethereum's security with way lower fees and way kind of like a faster finality, while also being able to offer this enterprise model or architecture in which they can offer a product or they can actually kind of like trust their margins. They can have a solid business model that don't have to be fluctuating or doesn't rely on the amount of use on the network or whatnot. So I think once these, and that makes you stand out from a lot of other platforms. Let's say, for example, a lot of L1s or side chains. I'm not going to mention any of them, but a lot of L1s or side chains that are out there have just the same type of ability of allowing companies to maintain fees low or maybe stable or whatnot. But then, how secure are those? Over here we will be talking about Ethereum's underlying security. So we're talking about this most secure and most decentralized network in the world. And I think by combining that with the stability or the fee stability that allows businesses to offer kind of like or to enjoy fixed margins and have a kind of like a normal kind of like business model is going to be key for adoption. Either like bear market, bull market, whatever you want. I think that's the right path, and that will really facilitate the transition of businesses from Web 2 to Web 3.
And last question from the audience. When Aave integration?
They want to spill the beans. Okay, so that's one of the upcoming deployments that are going to be coming to Metis. I don't want to give out any fixed dates. Again, I'm very sorry for repeating this so much, but just stay tuned. Stay tuned. We'll be sharing every single piece of it on our socials. So I just don't want to talk any more that I can in here. So it'll be good.
Awesome. We'll definitely keep our eyes open and on your socials. And speaking of that, how can our listeners get involved to become a Metizen?
Well, absolutely. Like anyone that is listening can go ahead and follow our Twitter channel. Our Twitter handle is right there. He's the co-host of these Twitter Spaces, Metis, with the little green leaf right next to it. You can follow us on Twitter. You can join our channels, like our communication channels, for example, Telegram, Discord. You can even participate in our governance. There's a lot of channels in which the Metis community is very active, and it's growing by the day. So I would definitely say join our channels like Telegram and Discord mainly. Follow us on Twitter, and if you are looking forward to get a lot of or to see a lot of educational content, you can also follow us on Instagram. These are all like Instagram is mostly for educational content, but community per se, Twitter, Discord, Telegram. You can show up, tag me, let's hang out.
Awesome. Jose, it's been so great chatting with you today. Thank you and everyone listening for joining our space. We hope that you learned something new. And if you want more information on Metis, Feel free to check out their token page on Gemini's mobile app or visit their website at metis.io. If you have any additional questions for Jose, please feel free to drop them in the chat below or reach out to him on Discord or any of those socials that he mentioned. Cheers.
Thank you for having us, Brittany. Cheers, everyone.
So great to have you, Jose. Cheers.